Hello, hello. You're listening to Peaceful Homeschool Podcast. I am Emma.
And I'm Beth.
Hi, Beth. Today we have a special guest. Our guest is Diane Boden. She's from the Minimalist Moms Podcast, and she is going to share a little bit about herself this morning. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yes. So I do have 3 children. Their ages are 8, 5, and 3. I do homeschool my oldest daughter. And we've been doing this for about 2 years now. My son does go to kindergarten, and then my 3-year-old, he is about to start preschool. So we'll figure out what the journey of homeschooling looks like for them in the next few years here. But yeah, I have fallen in love with homeschooling and just the ability to be outside in nature. I would say that nature is one of the biggest ways that our family wants to connect with one another and enjoys and loves connecting with one another. And so I feel like that was one of the main foundations of why I wanted to start homeschooling. But yeah, I am a mom of those 3 kiddos, like I said, and we live in Columbus, Ohio. I am host of the Minimalist Moms Podcast and author of the book Minimalist Moms Living and Parenting with Simplicity, which I'm sure we'll talk about all of this and dive deeper into all of this. But yeah, I have been hosting the show for, I think, 7-8 years now.
Wow.
And yeah, it's been a fun creative project turned job at this point. It's very crazy. But yeah, I would say that I'm into creativity and photography and anything that I can get my creative hands on. That's what I enjoy doing. So
cool. Okay. So, oh my gosh, number one, thank you for being here. Like, this is super duper duper exciting for us. So we both homeschool, obviously.
yeah.
We both have older kids, so we've kind of been on this journey for a long period of time. So can you tell us what brought you to homeschool your daughter?
Yeah.
You said about 2 years now?
Yeah, we're almost to the end of our 2nd year. I would say that it was something that I never intended to do. My degree is in English pre-education for 4th through 12th grade. And my student teaching was done actually for my husband in his classroom. And
Nice.
I would watch him and just think to myself, one day when I have kids, I'm not going to be able to do this. Just not well. For me, it was going to be way too much pressure to say, you have to show up day in and day out for all these 30 kids. So I decided to say no to that and was just kind of dabbling in creativity. And a lot of people around me were homeschooling. And so I would say I had some insight to what that might look like. And then with the pandemic happening, she was in preschool, kindergarten at that time. And I was like, you know what? There's no point in trying to do whatever this is that school's looking like right now with public school or just even in private schools. Why don't we give this a shot? And kind of like I said at the beginning, one of the biggest other reasons was that I wanted her to stay little and have this connectivity to nature and to, I don't know, just whatever we wanted to do as a family. So just looking to the others that I was starting to find myself in community with, or just following people along on Instagram, we were saying, okay, let's do this. Let's give this a try. And then the nature element came into play because I wanted my daughter I wanted her to stay little and I didn't want her away from me. And so I think there are many reasons that we finally decided to take the plunge and try it for ourselves. But I think mostly it was like, you're little. I want you to stay little as long as possible. The world is very big and intense. And if I can try and come alongside you right now and guide you and, I don't know, just maybe like bubble you in a way, but I've found out since then that homeschooling, it doesn't mean bubbling. So
Yeah.
it's been a very interesting part of all this. So yeah.
I think that's so similar to so many of us. You know, I felt the same way. I was like, our kids are going to get to a point where they would be expected to go to school, and we're not willing to do that. I wanted them to stay little. And, you know, now that Beth and I both have kids on the other end of it, there was some bubbling in that we were able to insulate them from some of the things, that we were able to guide them through things that were like, well, you're not really ready to be exposed to certain things. But not bubbling in the terms of you're not going to hang out with people or get to spend time with people. Because instead it's like, we need to have some home time at some point in our lives because we're out having fun with friends all the time.
Yeah. I think for me, I wanted to be the one to first address certain topics. So even the other day, my daughter was coming, again, she's 8, she was talking about periods. And it's crazy the questions that kids come up with. And I'm like, oh, I just take this for granted that I know all of this stuff and you don't. But I felt so confident in sharing truth with her. And I think the thing is, I shouldn't be afraid to ever share truth. I feel I should feel confident in that, but I want to get there first. And so I
Right.
think that was the big thing, regardless of what it fill in the blank of whatever comes into her mind at school. I just wanted to get there first to have a bit of a foundation, and then we can talk through those things together. And again, I'm sure, I mean, I'm assuming most of your audience does homeschool or has interest in homeschool, but yeah, I just think that as the parent, that's, I guess, my duty and I want to say my right. So
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
for sure. For sure. Okay, so you kind of talked to us a little bit about your family's homeschool style. So, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose a minimalist life?
yes. So, if anyone has listened to my podcast in your audience, they may have heard this story before. But to summarize, when I was 21, 22, my husband and I were in my parents' basement. We were looking for something. And to paraphrase what he said to me, he said, look at these things that are now in boxes that were once your dad's hardworking hours. And for some reason, it sent a light bulb to my brain, or a light bulb went off in my brain to say, oh my gosh, what have I been working for? I've been working for a closet full of clothes. I've been working for these electronics to upgrade, to always have the nicest thing, or that are one day going to be in boxes in my basement. Or do I want to start taking my energy, taking my working hours and putting them towards family, friends, experiences? So that was about, again, 21, 22, 23 that we had that conversation. I don't really remember at this point, but that was kind of the foundation and catalyst for this lifestyle for us. And then we've just slowly applied it to children. I'm finding that it's getting more difficult as kids are getting older and they have their own opinions, or just now that I have these small businesses, it's hard to stay on top of, I talk about clutter all day, and then it's hard to stay on top of my own clutter. However, I would say for the most part, our house is decluttered to a point so where it's very easy to do a quick tidy and to be able to get everything done on my daily checklist that I need to do, because I've set up my house in the way that makes it easily managed. And so I would just say, in regards to what was your original question, was like, why did we choose to do this? Sorry.
Yeah, how'd you get started that way?
Yeah. So that was like the original start of all of this, I would say. And then I don't know if you want to talk about how it applies to homeschooling, but I would just say it helps us to be more intentional, because we're intentional in the things that we're accumulating, how we're managing things, how we're going to maybe dictate our time. It just makes it much more easily manageable when we're saying, okay, we have to sit down every day and teach you math and English and all of this, fill in the blank. So I would just say, yeah, it just helps us to be more intentional, to beat a dead horse.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed, like, in our homeschool journey, for me, like, I also I would collect every single thing for homeschooling I could possibly find, and have, like, I had a whole homeschool room, and I thought I had to have a homeschool room, and all these things and I just had this massive collection. And then I was like busy managing that and not enjoying homeschooling, because I was managing this stupid stuff that was like ridiculous. And then when I started realizing I can have like a homeschool shelf, whatever doesn't fit in there, I don't use, I'm getting rid of, or whatever. It just was like really, it was like this huge shift for me when I started getting in more of a minimalist mindset in our homeschool. And it just made it so much easier, because I noticed as a homeschool mom, I was like getting overwhelmed by having too much stuff everywhere, too much laundry, too much everything. Like, and it just, I was wasting my time on stuff that, instead of enjoying being with my kids, I was wasting my time, like, on stuff that was just a waste. Like, so anyway,
Yeah.
it goes so well with homeschooling. Like, minimalism is so amazing for homeschool parents to
Yeah.
incorporate.
Well, and also I talk a lot about on the show how to be, or we need to be really honest and rational with what we're keeping and what we're saying yes to. And so when we first started out last year, I had all this stuff. And then as I was assessing what we were actually truthfully using on the day to day, it was far less than what I had thought. We do still have a cabinet of books and some like encyclopedia resources that I like to have that are kind of vintage and fun. But I mean, they're easily managed. And yeah, I think that people think you need all this stuff to get started, or it's fun. And I mean, there are some beautiful curriculums and beautiful things that I'd love to own. And I'm not the person that has that beautiful schoolroom with all the wooden toys and the beautiful prints. I like that. I see a place for it. It's not necessarily my personality. And also, I think I have to kind of opt out of, why am I doing this? Why am I bringing all this stuff in? Is it because I want to photograph it for Instagram? And I think that was something I had to challenge myself with. A few years back when Minimalist Moms started getting more popular, it was like, okay, I have to have all this stuff for minimalism because I want to be like the other minimalist. And it's like, no, that's not realistic. And I'm trying to tell women, just kind of stay in your lane. What does it look like for you? It's going to look different for everyone. And if that's not your personality, why are you doing that? And also, that's not why you're valuable. And that's not why you're valuable to your kids. And I don't know. So I like to go back to rationality and just being reasonable with ourselves of why we're doing kind of everything.
I love that. And Beth is definitely better at that than I am.
Yeah.
I like growing up super poor, which I mean, Beth also, had that issue, but like, I just have this like, oh my gosh, we might need it again. And how do I get rid of it? And we moved halfway across the country 2 years ago. So that helped. We got rid of a lot of stuff, like a ton of stuff, which is really great. But still, I think like, oh, I still have one, my kids are 20, 18, and 12. And so I'm like, I still have a sixth grader who needs to get through high school. I'm not going to get rid of all my high school stuff and rebuy all my high school stuff. And so it's like that part of it for me is hard, to be like, I don't want to get rid of the stuff that I'm going to need to buy again and pay for again. So I'm here to listen to all of your wisdom.
No, I think that makes sense though, because you know that you are going to get there with your student or with your child.
Daughter,
And and so for me, I was holding on to a lot of newborn stuff and even some toys because, oh, maybe we'll accidentally have a fourth. And so I want to keep it just in case. But intentionally, I'm not trying to have a fourth child. And so I can let go of those things. I may have to buy it again in the future, but I know like our vision is not to have another one. So I think if your vision is to continue to homeschooling, it makes sense to keep on, what am I trying to say? Keep hold of those things. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there of why we're keeping the things and if it is, again, rational.
Well, thanks. That makes me feel better. No.
Yeah.
So when my first son was like, when he was around a year and a half, we found out that we had like a huge mold problem in the apartment we were in, and we had to move and leave everything we owned. That's what everybody told us at that time. Now they clean it and do different things, but at that time it was like, get out, don't, because he had all these health problems. So we moved into an empty apartment, completely empty with nothing, and we slowly put some basics in there. But, and it was really crazy just to have like nothing. And so then I went into this thing of, I need everything. Like, so I started over shopping and getting everything, and I filled it up in this little apartment. But what the part that was really interesting is when I had nothing, my house was super easy to clean because there was nothing. And, and I had so much fun with my son. We'd go to the park all the time, and we were always doing all these fun things. And then when I filled up our space, I didn't have that fun anymore. Like the fun went away, but I had all this stuff, but I wasn't having fun anymore. I was overwhelmed and sad and stressed because I had so much stuff. And then we moved into our first house that we bought, 1,400 square feet. And then we moved from it like 5 years later, and we had to have 2 trucks. And there was stuff in the attic. There was stuff everywhere. And I went into like a hoarder mentality because I lost everything. I went into the stress mode of replace it all. But what was interesting is what I learned from that is when I looked back, I had so much more fun when I didn't have anything. And I was like, oh. So, and when I had that aha kind of moment thing, I was like, oh, I can be happier with less. So anyway, that was my big thing.
Yeah, no, our stuff really does weigh us down, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. And I think that's the part that people aren't seeing. They're wanting to declutter their house, but then they lack motivation to do so. And it's like, if you just put a little effort in, that struggle of the mind that you constantly are facing would actually go away. Maybe not all the way, but I just think about when I enter my house and it's a total disaster, which is rare, but if it is, it's just like, okay, I can't focus. And I don't think that's just a personality thing. There's statistics that say that
Yeah.
our brains want to see clear, like, I don't want to say pretty, but yeah, we don't want chaos. We want order. Our brains seek order, efficiency. And so when my house is cluttered, or in the past, if it has been, yeah, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
For sure. I feel like I cannot rest. And I remember that being like a trait that my mom would always talk about, was like with 7 kids. And, she's like, oh my gosh, like, can we just clean up really quick? Because I cannot stop and rest until there is order, basically. And I
Yeah.
definitely feel the same way. Like, if I'm like, can we just do like a fast clean? We're done. It took us 5 minutes. The house is clean. We can sit down and I can feel like I can rest. Whereas my kids are like, it's all right. I'm like, no. I want to rest too. So let's clean this really fast together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we Beth and I had kind of talked about how that really can be implemented in simplifying home management. And as a homeschool parent, when you're in the house more, your kids are not leaving and going to school and leaving you home, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
how that really can impact your homeschool life as well. And our goal in having our podcast is to help people understand how they can simplify their lives, how they can have like a peaceful life and not so much chaos all the time, and not, always have clutter in their head going on. So can you just speak to that a little bit, like how that really can bring some clarity into your homeschooling, into your, just your existence in general?
Yeah. So going back to what I said earlier about what do we actually need? My goal with the podcast and with my life is to get rid of what's superfluous. So meaning like what is not necessary. And for us, we actually don't spend a ton of time here. In the winter, we're here a little bit more, but we're a part of co-ops. We're constantly in nature. And so that kind of helps me manage in the day in, day out, because we're not here all day long. But for
Right.
people that might not be so extroverted, or that's not what homeschooling looks like for them, I would just look to your home and figure out how you can set up efficient like system and places. Don't let your countertops become catch-alls. Don't let the entryway become a catch-all for the papers that you need to address, and the shoes are all out of control and this needs to be hung up. If you start implementing systems, I love this, it's the 1 minute rule. If something takes you 1 minute or less, like give or take, do it right then and there, because those things are going to build by the end of your day, when you might need to prep for homeschool, or you're exhausted and you want to take a break. And if we are just addressing these things as we're running into them, I don't know, I think that my house just becomes a lot more efficient in those ways. But yeah, I would say, what else do I want to say about that? Are you, like you said, how does it apply to my life? Like
Yeah.
the simplifying. I would also say that outside of possessions, it's what are we saying yes to? And I have to catch myself sometimes, because again, I am extroverted. I love to be around friends and family, but am I saying yes to things just because I have to check a box? So I was a part of MOPS. I don't know if you were familiar with MOPS, but
Yeah.
I was finding that my connections there were slightly more surface level. So I ended up quitting, even though I felt like that was the thing that a lot of people in my church were doing at the time, or that like I should do as a mom of preschoolers. And then I was like, no, I'd rather just be more intentional about who I'm spending my time with. I'd rather invest in these relationships, help my children, and start to invest in the friendships. And again, we don't know if they're going to be friends with my friends' kids long term, but just kind of giving them those options of more depth versus this thing that we just kind of feel like we have to do. And I feel like with minimalism, or just simplicity in general, it's assessing what it is that we really want, what are our values, and a great visualization that you could do is write down the top 3 to 5 things that you say you value, and then write down the top 3 to 5 things that you're actually doing in your day to day, your week to week, and then compare the lists. And again, you have to be honest with yourself. But if those lists are not, if there's not a correlation there, it's time to reassess. And so that was something that I had to do again with MOPS, a priority, but like deep relationships was one of my top values. And I was like, I'm not really seeing this. And so I also do think there's a season for everything, and being a mom of littles is hard. So sometimes you just have to get out however you can. But yeah, I would say that for someone kind of looking to start, if we're talking about the mental element of how we can apply minimalism, it would be that list is a great starting point.
I love that. So Beth and I both are big proponents of teaching our kids young and getting them involved in, family chores, in family life, in having a team as a family, instead of like, here's the mom doing everything, here's the dad doing his specific things, and then the kids just do whatever. So do you implement that with your kids? Like having them help, making sure their stuff is hung up or their shoes are put away or, whatever in your house?
Yeah, I mean, we try to stay on top of that. It's hard when you want to control things. I always say I'm kind of a control freak, and sometimes it's easier to do those things and just get them done. But I definitely have the expectation that if we get something out, I want them to help put that thing away. We're really big on toy rotation here. So they have boxes of, what is it? The Lincoln Logs, Magnetiles, a train, certain Legos, and then I'll switch those out with other things. So maybe a puzzle. And again, the box helps them see where they need to clean up and like how they can get it back into that thing. And then also, I guess just in regards to, if we're talking about physical decluttering in their rooms, if you have visual boundaries for their toys and saying you can only fill up this much space, it also keeps it much easier to manage for them. If they're having a chaotic room full to the brim of things, I think that would be harder to implement chores and having them help, because they don't really know where to start, depending on the age. Again, I have a 3-year-old, and so I have to really come alongside of him, whereas my 8-year-old, she can do it a little bit better. But yeah, I think just like hanging up your coat when you come in, the shoes, yeah, we all just take part in those things, and it starts at a really young age. But again, if you are listening and you have older kids, I think that kids are adaptable and that you can just start. I mean, anyone can change habits. It might take some work and effort, but it's possible.
That's awesome. So you also obviously work and homeschool. How do you juggle that? Do you have any advice for working parents out there? I mean,
I'm like,
working
not
homeschool
well,
parents?
not well right now. No, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I think I was just telling a friend yesterday, when you have a creative venture, whether that is photography or if you're trying to do this Instagram thing or whatever it looks like, when you don't have certain work hours, it's really easy to say, okay, when I'm not doing fill in the blank, I'm going to be working. And that's what I found myself doing the last like 9 to 12 months is any downtime. It's like, okay, I'm going to work on content for the podcast. I'm going to work on emails for the podcast, and not giving myself margin to just be and exist. And even if I was going on walks, I found myself sending emails or just, okay, I can take a few minutes here and do this. And it's just not healthy. So balance looks like setting boundaries, which is, everyone knows that, but actually implementing them, because you will find yourself, if you're not creating boundaries, it a really big struggle. And I found myself at that struggle at last fall, just not saying no, taking on too much work. I have a photography business. That's my other business that I have. And I'm very busy in the falls, and saying yes just for the money is not worth it if your brain is suffering and you're not fulfilling the roles that you signed up for, like homeschooling. I signed up to be a homeschooling mom. I told my husband, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it well. And I'm going to have this great relationship with my daughter. And when they're getting the leftovers of me because I'm trying to lead this business, it just, something has to give. And so it's going to look different for me than it looks like for you. But yeah, I think just, again, go back to your honesty with yourself and figure out what you can manage. And it's okay. And it's okay to not like what you see. I think that's the thing. It's okay to not like that, because that's a starting point for change. And if we are dishonest with ourselves, then I don't think we're ever going to get to that point of health and change, because we're lying to ourselves. And so we just keep trying to grasp at straws of what is it that I really need to change. And I don't know, really, we're not addressing the main like root of our issues. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
I think Beth and I have had to reassess a few times and say, like, okay, wait, are we putting so much time into a venture that, I mean, we love that it's helping people, but it doesn't make us any money. It doesn't, add value in that way, and is costing money for us at this point.
Mhm.
But, like, what is our real job here? And I have had to like tell myself and then say to Beth a few times, like, I have to remember I'm still homeschooling an 18-year-old with special needs. I'm still homeschooling a 12-year-old. And what did homeschooling look like for my older kids? It still involved me being there doing everything with them, not being like, cool, 12-year-old, go do your own thing while I do a podcast. Like, no, that's not what I'm in for. So
Mhm.
for sure, we've had that conversation quite a few times to say, like, okay, what's our priority? She has her own whole farm going on, so
That's
she's
awesome.
got a priority there too. So
I think even people, I was trying to think of people that are not working moms. And obviously, if you're homeschooling, you don't have like the PTO or whatnot at school, but moms that might be a part of a co-op, I think that you might be investing way too much in your co-op. Or I do have a friend that was going to school while homeschooling her kids. And I don't know exactly what that looked like for her, but I think anything can take our focus off our main focus. And again, I am definitely someone that my role is not just mom. My role is not just wife. I have many roles and many facets. And I think that I was created to be that, like to fill many different roles. But I think again, when they're starting to flail and you're noticing and you don't address it, then it starts to spiral. And that's what I've noticed in my own life.
Yeah. Me too.
agreed. Okay, so you also wrote a book. Can you share a little bit about that? And then we will have a link for it in our show notes so that our listeners can find it as well.
Yeah. So the book is Minimalist Moms Living and Parenting with Simplicity. And for people that listened to the podcast years ago, I had these things called minimalist mantras, and it's just a 5-minute thought, start today. And so it would just be me talking at you, I guess, for 3 to 5 minutes about how you can start today, what that looks like. You don't have to push it off until tomorrow. You can always start in the next moment, in the next meal, and the next interaction with someone. So that was all about start today. So my book, there were 3 sections. And then within those 3 sections, I had 10 mantras within each. And then there were larger sections on sentimentality, holidays, and sustainability. So it's easily digestible. It was something that I didn't want you to necessarily sit down with and from start to finish. I think I kind of wanted you, especially for beginners, to say, hey, this aligns with what I'm looking for right now. Read it. There's a prompt that you can work on for the week. And I also tried to include from Instagram, I polled a bunch of people on how they were applying these topics. And so you have real minimalist moms living it out in there that I thought was helpful. But yeah, it was just my desire to get out some type of guide for realistic minimalism for motherhood, kind of just the beginning starter point for people.
That's awesome. Okay, so tell me the name again.
Minimalist Moms Living and Parenting with Simplicity.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
that's
a
super
great
cool.
book. I read it, and it's a great book. So you did a great
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
it's
awesome.
Very helpful.
I'm like, I'd love to write again, but I don't know if I have it in me. I look back and I'm like, how did I even get that done? I don't even know. It was during COVID that I wrote it. And my husband was home from school, obviously during the summer. And he just gave me 3 months and I knocked it out. I just
Wow.
got it done.
So cool. Okay, so I think we're almost at the end of our time. Can you tell us, like, what's one of your favorite things about homeschooling?
Again, I think that I go back to nature. If it's outside of nature, I would just say seeing my daughter learn something that I still don't know. I think that's really exciting. We are part of Classical Conversations, and the things that she's learning and telling me about are so exciting to me because I'm like, Charlotte, I'm learning this alongside of you. And I think that's kind of fun. Maybe I'm living vicariously through her in that way, but I love seeing that.
That's super awesome. I think we all do that too. I'm always like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. How do you know that already?
Yeah.
I know.
It's really fun. It's super fun.
Yes. Okay, Diane, we could talk to you all day long. This has been super fun. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will direct all of our listeners to find you on Minimalist Moms Podcast and through your book. And we are just so grateful you were here with us today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.